We've broken down Arizona and Arizona State, the defending Big 12 champion Sun Devils, and now Baylor with what is a great schedule, especially early, and then we don't know what's going to happen in the Big 12, who's going to be what, but I freaking love this. Auburn at SMU and Samford to start it out. We'll go with that triplet right there, the trifecta. I love this schedule. I don't know how they'll do in it. I'm going to say come out of it 2-1, but I think they want more than that, but that's a great schedule.
Well, look, they have one game on this schedule that if you were a Baylor fan, you would just kind of phone in, and that would be Samford. And no offense to Samford, but, you know, they're an FCS program. So 11 of the 12 games are absolute bangers compared to every other schedule they've ever had. And when you start out with Auburn and SMU, man, that is amazing top two games. More than likely, you know, if this schedule just stays partly as good as we think it could be if the teams all kind of stay who they are on paper, this is one of the toughest in the country and should be very entertaining all year long. But Auburn, SMU to open up. In Auburn, especially early on, Hugh Freeze starts the year under the gun of you got to get something done, and Jackson Arnold, likely unless he doesn't win the job, but I don't see that happening, his first start for Auburn will come here in Waco.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good non-conference schedule. Jackson Arnold is going to make Auburn better, you would think, than what we saw them trotting out there last year, although he needs to be a lot better than what we saw him trotting out there last year as well. So I think those two will help each other in a good way compared to their 2024 campaigns. But to what extent, especially in the first game of the year, I have no idea. Like we said when we started this is not like a record prediction and like full-on season preview. So just looking at the schedule itself, I mean, that's probably the best non-conference schedule in the Big 12. I don't know everybody's off the top of my head or like the back of my hand, but I can't imagine there's too many other teams that are playing Auburn and SMU level in the same three-game stretch. So to have the Auburn game in Waco to start things off, first game of the year, really tees up nicely to maybe pull an upset since we don't know how good Auburn's going to be, but a nice opportunity in week one to make a huge statement regardless of what Auburn eventually is by the time January rolls around. So, yeah, that's the biggest game that's been at that stadium. And as far as non-conference, I don't know, ever. Trying to think of who else has rolled through. I mean, Utah or someone like that, I guess. But
yeah, there's a lot of fun with that one, or BYU a couple 3 years ago, but not like this.
I think Auburn will be like the quote unquote the sexiest team as far as name and brand and all of that. And then SMU coming off the playoff. I mean, Baylor's pretty much dominated SMU, but the first game at McLean was SMU, and that's a different SMU than the one that we've seen the last couple years with Rhett Lashley. They're a very formidable team. They're obviously now in the ACC. So, yeah, you got a SEC and ACC opponent back-to-back. Go and play up in Dallas in front of what should be a pretty good crowd. And then Samford, that's your one give-me win. But, yeah, you could very easily be 0-2 to start the season if you're not careful.
All right, then you start the conference play. And, of course, there's not 9 games. They have not only that really good – against who they're playing non-conference, and then you get the defending champions in your first Big 12 game.
Yeah, whoever made this schedule was not afraid
a computer.
The computer.
Johnny algorithm.
Yeah, no, Dave Aranda and the team are going to have to not be afraid of anything and be ready for it all because, you know, again, and I'll say it every time we do it, outside of the team I'm picking dead last, Oklahoma State, in the Big 12, this first 6 weeks is such a bear, and Samford, it's a bear. It's an absolute bear of a schedule, but Big 12 champs to open up. You know, that's going to be a fantastic quarterback matchup. You know, in the first 6 games, they've got Jackson Arnold, Kevin Jennings, Sam Levitt, and Avery Johnson before the bye. Like, those are quarterbacks and offenses you're going to have to contend with. I couldn't have put together a tougher schedule than this. I really couldn't have for them.
So they do 6-3-3, which is 6 games straight to start the season, and then 3 games after your first bye, and then your second bye, 3 games to finish it out. So that's a bit different than we've seen the first couple of teams those two, Arizona State did not have, I believe, a 6-game stretch on either one of those schedules, much less to start the season. And so correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think that's what I remember correctly. And that really difficult non-con, as you pointed out, goes into a really difficult at least 2 of those first 3 Big 12 games. We don't know what Oklahoma State's going to be, but, yeah, to get Arizona State right out of the gate, Arizona State, SMU, and Auburn, that's 2 playoff teams and a team from the mighty SEC. So you could be reeling, you could be flying. Really no clue, and obviously we won't make predictions and all that till we actually get closer to the season. But that's a tough task. And then, Oklahoma State, don't know, and K-State, that's all your games up until that first bye, man. That is brutal. At least K-State's at home. But with Oklahoma State such a wild card, that's in Stillwater, so that throws you for a little bit of an extra challenge perhaps. So, yeah, that's got to be as probably tough of the first 6 games as maybe anybody in the country.
I want to go back to the game if you play the game up to Arizona State, 2 of those 4 teams were in the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, how many are going to be doing that, right? Yeah. And you guys brought that up with the Sanford, but yeah, Stillwater, you never know, even though we don't know who they're going to be. They don't know who they're going to be. Last time Kansas State came to Baylor, didn't they take their heart, soul, manhood, and everything with them, including the furniture? Wasn't that game when they came rolling in like in 22?
Yeah, it's when the whole losing streak started.
Yeah.
It's when the whole Dave Aranda going on the hot seat. It all began with that ass whooping at McLean Stadium.
Yep.
Yes, that was a couple years ago.
Yep. All right, so there we are with the first half of the schedule. Auburn, SMU, Sanford, Arizona State, Oklahoma State, Kansas State. Those are the 6 games, and then as Craig, it's different because they get the bye. I got the hiccups. They get the bye after that, and then you get another one later on, so you get a little breather down the stretch if you can get to that point. Now let's go to TCU, Cincinnati, UCF.
Protect your online privacy with NordVPN. Browse securely, access content from anywhere, and keep your data safe with military-grade encryption. Whether at home or on the go, NordVPN ensures your digital freedom. Stay secure. Download NordVPN today at nordvpn.com. That's NORDVPN.com.
TCU on the road, never a place that Baylor likes to play, but they finally did break the losing streak last year. And in a classic game, one of the most fun games you're ever going to see between these two. And now you get TCU another year into their system, another, more old Baylor coaches on their staff and all of those things. But Josh Hoover, who played really, really well down the stretch, Craig and I were talking about it yesterday when I was trying to make quarterback tiers, and he threw a lot of interceptions early. He didn't late, and Craig reminded me of that. So that's going to be a tough one. Cincy on the road, they're kind of in the void for me. It's like I want to say they'll be better, but I don't know. Like they're losing a couple things, and I just don't know where they're at. And then UCF is the other wild card in this conference of who knows how good UCF is going to be in year 1 under Scott Frost.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway from this second portion is that their most difficult portion of the entire season on paper is the first 6 games. Is that first stretch, and whatever they do there is going to kind of dictate what we're talking about for the second and third portions of the season, because the schedule on paper lightens up immensely. Now, TCU is never going to be an easy game, but it also doesn't matter how good or bad TCU is. It's still just TCU. It's a rivalry game. It doesn't matter what record they have. That's going to be a tough game. You just know it will be. And Josh Hoover did not throw interceptions in his final 3 games. Now, he had a stretch early on in the first portion of the season where he was throwing at least one pretty much every game. And then he had a portion in the middle part of the season where I think he had 3 straight games that he threw 2 interceptions in each of those games. I mean, it was bad, the turnover problem. But then he didn't throw a single one in the last 3 weeks. Now, he had fumbling issues at times as well. So, he's definitely got to clean that up, but he's still one of the more talented quarterbacks in the entire league if he can eliminate the turnover bug as he did late in the year as far as throwing picks goes. But, that's always going to be a tough game. And then Cincinnati, that one in Cincinnati, the last time they played, it was a bit of a nail-biter. Baylor won late. I don't really sweat that one too much, especially not knowing much about Cincinnati at this stage. And then, but you do know that they'll be potentially playing for their coach's job. I mean, in October, late October. And then UCF, much like Cincinnati, don't quite know what to expect. So on paper, that seems like a pretty easy in comparison to the first 6 games. That seems like a pretty easy second stint that it starts to lighten up a little bit for you. And now you see those opportunities that are a bit better percentage-wise for you than Auburn, SMU, K-State, so on and so forth. The second half starts to ease up, but you'll still have to go out and earn it. And TCU, you never can just chalk that up as a win by any means. So I think at this point is where it's just a mystery of where are they going to be by the time this second leg starts after that gauntlet to start the season. Like, are they having to win out to make a bowl game? They were not going to be 0-6, but they have to win like 5 of their last 6 to win to go to a bowl game. That's what I'm curious about.
I think this is going to be the year, with maybe an exception, that what we think the Big 12 will be, they will be.
No.
I said it.
You got medicine shot in your body yesterday, so I'm a little worried.
It's all over the place.
I'm a little worried. Yeah,
I've got
worried.
like
yeah,
9
no.
supplements and 2 prescriptions.
No,
I think so. I think
the schedule is certainly easier in the last 5 than the first 7 for Baylor, but to me that means very little when it comes to this conference. And look, when we get into the next pod, I'll go more into it, but. Yeah, I think the season kind of swings on, how you do against Kansas State and TCU, and where are you 4-3, 3-4? Are you in that spot before you hit at worst, or are you better? I mean, like Baylor could come out gangbusters and be 6-1.
They could be in the top 15 pretty quickly.
Yeah, Grayson brought that up. Yeah, if they were to get off to a 4-5-0 start, which again I don't expect them to, but they could be. You're right. They could get some. And by the way, you need to beat the SEC and the ACC when you have a chance to do that in the non-conference. Okay, so if you would have taken this schedule and put it last year, we would have looked at Arizona State. Okay, there's a win. Oklahoma State. We never thought they were going to be that good, but we weren't. No one had them up too high. Wet Blanket did.
Well, I mean, I picked him 4th, and I was told I was an idiot.
You see what happens?
I got called a fat idiot for that one. That one was.
Oh, is that supposed to be double down?
Yeah, double. Hey, by the way, you have a weight problem. Yeah, no, I know it every time I put my friggin' pants on. But it's that one was you don't know ball. I was like, oh well, Guess what? That person was right because I picked them way too high.
All right. So, among the guys they have on the schedule this year, the Baylor, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, UCF, Utah, and Arizona and Houston, all of them, what were they last year? Did they make a bowl game?
No.
Yeah. No.
No.
No one did.
Arizona State, of course, we know what they did, and then Kansas State still was good. TCU, like you said, Craig, it comes down to Hoover taking care of the football. Yeah. All right. What else you want to do with this one?
Well, we got
the third leg of the schedule.
I know. Well,
yeah. The third leg, though.
I know that, but I was just throwing. There's certain nuggets where there's nothing wrong with me bringing up what I just said.
Yeah. So you asked what's next. The third leg of the schedule.
So now Utah, Arizona, and Houston.
Yeah, so the third leg of the schedule, Utah, we don't quite know what they're going to be, but that's in Waco, so that's favorable. Arizona, I think they're scraping for a bowl berth based on what we talked about the other day and the uncertainty surrounding them. And then Houston, I mean, they rolled into Waco and won a couple years ago with not a very good team at all. So it's doable for them, and no idea by November 29th what anybody looks like this far out. But that's a feasible schedule. We're on paper right now. I'd say that's 3-0 or 2-1. And I know that's probably not going to be accurate by the time we get there, but I don't think you're sweating Arizona right now. I don't think you're sweating Houston, other than that's just a Texas game, so it's going to be more personal. And then Utah, I think you respect them, but I don't think there's this armor on them that there was prior to last football season, whether it be via the program itself or the fan base. I think that those shields got knocked down and splintered throughout Big 12 play last year, but they're a proud program, and they're going to get back on track, and I think they're going to be much better. But still, I feel like Baylor's in a position where they can beat Utah, and they can beat Utah at home. So, I think the final 5 games, on paper, I'd say you're 5-0 down that stretch. It's a matter, though, of what you are, I guess, leading into that, and obviously those final 5 games might, again, look a lot different by the time we get there. So that's how they finish out, and I think you'd be plenty happy with that. So it's definitely a tale on paper of 2 halves of this season. The first 7 and those final 5 look awfully different.
Yeah, but I will tell you this, like I told you yesterday, Craig, I think Devin Dampier changes Utah quite a bit because that was their kind of issue. And then secondarily, Arizona, again, kind of lives in that Cincinnati area where what are they going to be? But Houston, I would rather play Houston early as they find their footing with Connor Wigman than late under Willie Fritz in year 2. That's a scary game at the end of the year for me, because if Willie Fritz does his Willie Fritz thing, then that's the time that they'll start being like, oh, watch out for these Houston Cougars in 2026. That's when they would make me nervous.
Yeah, I think, anytime you play an in-state team, it's almost like throwing the records out. But, yeah, I'm not really too worried about them at this point. And you miss some pretty good teams on the schedule for as tough as the schedule looks, again, on paper. You don't play Texas Tech, which, that's been, 3 straight years of blowouts, 2 for Baylor and 1 for Texas Tech. And the 2 Baylor blowouts were in Lubbock, and the one Tech blowout is in Waco, but that's a game that's usually pretty fiery, but that's not on the schedule. I don't know. I feel like there's no reason why the Texas teams shouldn't round robin each other outside of there's just an impossible algorithm, but I don't believe that. I believe there has to be a way where that's feasible, because it just makes little sense to not do that. So I think not having all the Texas teams play is a mistake. So you don't play Texas Tech. That's a big rivalry. Like, I know nationally people won't blink at that whatsoever, but for the fans of your conference who actually watch your games, that's a big game. That's as heated as you can get, like, in terms of respectability, but also a lot of hatred. Like, it's very much like TCU Baylor or TCU versus Texas Tech or whatever other ones might be missing, but you don't play them. So I think that kind of sucks, because that's a game that fans look forward to. You also don't play Colorado, which may or may not be a big deal. You don't play BYU, which that's probably a big deal because you expect them to be pretty good. You don't play West Virginia. Mm-hmm. You don't play Colorado, I mentioned. You don't play Kansas. And you don't play Iowa State. So I think you feel probably pretty good to avoid BYU, to avoid Iowa State, depending on how much you care about a rivalry, Texas Tech. So you might have caught a little bit of a break there, even though that first half is tough, like we said.
Well, the Texas Tech thing with just the self-emotional part of it with Joey and that staff, and, man, like you said, when they've beaten each other, they've beaten the hell out of each other those last 3 games, one way or the other.